Hiya, it's Amanda here from Lolli Lulu Crafts, and today I am featuring the new sets of stamps from Kenny K. And can you spot the difference? These are real stamps, not digi stamps, and photopolymer, beautiful sets, and this is the latest launch from Kenny K. And I am going to be making a card for you, and this is the image that I have picked to use. Isn't she just such a sexy mama? Anyway, that's who I'm going to be using. So I'm going to be stamping straight out of the box. I haven't used it before, so it'll be a first stamp for it, and I'm going to be using my rocker block here and some Memento ink pad in tuxedo black, because I'm going to be using my alcohol markers. So I'm just going to ink this up. And then the beauty of the rocker block is that, even as you can see, I'm making a bit of a mess on the rocker block itself around the edges, but it doesn't matter because when you rock, it doesn't make a mark with it, so it gets a beautiful stamp whatever mess you make around the edges. So it's kind of cool. And here we go, stamping this, and let's see how this turns out. First stamp with it, and wow, isn't that just stunning? I mean, it's come out so beautifully, and no prepping or anything for it, and it's just absolutely perfect stamp. So we're going to start colouring this now, and first thing I'm going to do is her skin. So I'm going to start off with the lightest colour, and I'm just going to put a wash of that colour down across all her skin areas, so her face, her neck, her arms and her ankles. And what I've decided is that the light source is going to be coming from the top left hand corner and down across her, but you can choose what you want with regard to that, or if you even want to worry about doing that, if you're still learning with your markers and things, you may think you just want to colour it in to just how you want to coloured. It's no rules, just do what you are comfortable with. This is how I like to colour, but it doesn't make it right and it doesn't make your way wrong. Okay, so now we're going on to the next colour, and this is going to be sort of a mid-tone colour, and I'm putting this in to kind of map out where my darkest shadows are going to be. And this basically helps so that if I did go wrong now and I marked it in the place that wasn't quite right, I could easily correct it because it's not the very darkest colour. So it's just used as a guide to allow me to know where to put my darkest colour when I get to it. And we're just working out here just where the shadowing would be. So, you know, her face is rounded, so they would be shadowing around the sides of her face. On her cleavage there, obviously she's a buxom young lady, so she'd have some shadowing there. And on the arms here, where her sleeves and body is creating a shadow, and between her fingers, etc. So we're just marking all these areas that would have shadowing, and then we can take those marks that we're putting now and use it as a save for when we get to the darker colour. And now we're going back down, not to the very lightest, but just to the one that's sort of between the next one up from the very lightest, and that's just then blending the edges of that darker colour out, because we don't want it to keep any harsh lines, so that by the time we get to it, because we've put the next sort of the very dark colour on, and it then starts drying out and keeps that harder line, we don't want that. So by using the lighter colour now, we're just blending those edges in now and creating a much smoother look. And really all you're doing with all of these things is you're kind of going up the colour range and back down again, or you know, whichever way that is, whether you're starting with darkest or the lightest, but you're going back up and down and just creating layering so that you gradually build up the colour to exactly where you want it, whatever it is you're colouring in, whether it's a piece of clothing or her skin or her hair. And that layering builds up a really nice depth to the colour that you're putting down, because often what happens is, and this is the darkest colour that we're putting on now, so we're really getting into the shadowing, but as you put down this, even this darkest colour, when you then put the next darkest colour and the next lightest, and going back down from the darkest to the lightest, you will find that your darkest colour kind of blends away, because the colours kind of pull out the darker colour down into the next colour, and so on and so on. So gradually that lovely darkness and richness that you have now has disappeared slightly. So that's why you go back up and down until you really achieve that richness of colour that you want. Now you'll find with the skin that you might think when you finish that, goodness, it looks really dark and really heavy, but you have to remember that you've still got all the clothing and the hair and all of that to put on, so that will take away from what appears to be a very strong look to the skin and make it look much softer than it looks until you put those other things in place. You see, we're just blending down again now from the darkest. We're just going down a shade each time till that colour is blended through and the line is softened. And you can see what I mean now about that dark colour that we started with, how much softer it now looks because we've been blending that down. And if you work quickly, you can do all of the skin in one go like this, because it is a nice small image, so it's not like you're doing a massive area all in one go. Now we're just putting some blush on her cheeks, so we're just flicking out from the edge towards the center of her face, just little flicks. And then we're going to take our soft colour pen there, natural coloured, and just go on the very edges of those flicks and just make sure that the pink is blended in at the edges there, so there's no harsh lines. And we're doing the same on the rest of her skin, because that was our next tone down, which is why I fitted the pink in there, because it made it work well with the next colour we needed to do. And now we're going back to that dark colour again, and we're redoing the layering, and you can see how putting that darkness in again is just lifting it and putting some richness into the tone and the shading. And now the next colour down again. But just a little bit more soft in the blending, so that we're just keeping some of that rich colour that we'd created. Now we're moving on to her jeans, and you can see here that I'm mixing in a pro marker, because this particular pro marker works really well with this two Copics, and they're all alcohol markers, so there's no problem in mixing them from the point of view of them being different types of markers or anything. Personally, I do prefer my Copics. I prefer the brush nib that they have, but you know, it's all preferences, and I started off with my pro markers and I still enjoy using them. It's just personally I do prefer that brush tip of the Copic. I find I get more control and a smoother look than I do with the nib of the pro marker. So we're just laying down a colour there of of the lightest colour, and then I'm going in again, just putting in with the next lightest colour, marking in where the shadows are going to be, so that I can see, without committing myself too much, where I want the darkest shade to be. So the insides of her legs would be dark irrespective of our light source, because obviously the shape of your legs and obviously shading around the knees, etc. But our light source coming from the top left means that this side of the leg would also have dark shading, but the other leg would not have the shading the same. It's going to have some shading, but it's not going to have our darkest shading. And since that colour that we just put down was mapping out our darkest shading, I didn't mark on the left leg as you look at it. Picture, I was trying to work out which leg it was. It's kind of like her right leg, but the left leg as we look at her. So that shading is going to be slightly lighter. So as I say, because we were mapping out the dark shading, I didn't mark anything on that side yet, but it will have some shading, because even though the light is coming from that side, she is like anybody, she has shape, and therefore she's going to get some difference in colour and shade on that side. So we'll just use our slightly lighter shaded pen. Now here we're using what I thought at the time was my darkest colour. As if you recall, I showed you 3 pens at the beginning, but I had quite a few pens out ready to use, and I missed in that the darkest of the shades that I'd put in this collection. So I have actually got a darker shade to use, which is great, because I think it really did give it a lift. So I'm just going back in here now and just blending out with my mid-tone, which just happens to be the Pro marker, and this is going to be the tone that we're going to use on the left leg as we look at it, on that outside edge there, to give a bit of shading on that outside edge as well. There we go. So we're just putting that in, and I think that just adds a little bit of shape. And these again is another classic example of how we go up and down the colour range, blending in and just adding layer upon layer of the colours until we get the depth and shades and lights etc. that we want. What you do need to watch is that you don't so saturate your paper that it starts to go kind of, the blending stops, it just goes kind of weird on you. If you think you're getting to that point, you can just stop, let it dry out a little bit, and then carry on. But you should be, as you're doing this, if you're not putting masses of ink down, if you're just being light with your strokes and what you're doing, with not too much pressure and therefore not so much ink is going down, then you should find that you're able to do quite a lot of layering before it becomes a problem. And also it really depends on the paper you use. I personally have found that the Copic paper has been the best. I have to be honest, I didn't want it to be, because it isn't the cheapest, and I've tried others and I did like the Nina very much, and I had some other brands that I tried as well which were very nice, but I really did find a big difference personally by using the Copic. I really was able to increase the amount of layering that I was able to do before the paper got so saturated that it just wasn't workable. And you can see as we start to build up that layering, how you, on some of the parts that where you're taking this shading all the way down the leg, for example, you're perhaps only doing little highlighting bits. I say highlighting, but it's kind of low lighting really, isn't it, because they're the darker colours, but you're just doing like little pieces of that colour. This colour I put in because I decided that I wanted a little bit more of the mid-tone and less of the lighter colour, so I just took that mid-tone out a little bit further, and now I'm using the darker colour just to add some real accent. And they're really easy images to colour because there's enough artist lines to guide you as to where to put your shading and stuff if you need it, and if you're a beginner, there's enough there to help you know where to colour. And here we go, here's the very dark colour that I told you that I hadn't found, and then I finally found it, and I think this really suddenly brings it to life. And you can see we're just doing a very delicate line, very thin accent. And I just love these Kenny K ladies. I think they're just so real sexy ladies, like proper women, you know, with the curves, and I think it's really cool to have images like that. But then as well, you've got the fun ones that are great for the kids too, so you have the real range. And I've always used Kenny K's digi-stamps, so to have them now in real stamps and to be invited to share those with you and kindly sent these sets of stamps to try and to share with you was very exciting, and I'm very grateful, and have really enjoyed using them actually. And I think you can see the results already. The image itself just stamped out beautifully. I literally had not prepped it. You saw me take it straight out the packet and ink it, and it inked up perfectly. So I think that tells you the quality, because sometimes you can't do that, can you? So anyway, we are now just again blending down that very dark colour and just bringing that shading into place. And you don't have to do as much as I do. I obviously like to spend a lot of time just working on the shading and going up and down the colour range, but you can stop sooner than that if you want. I've done videos before where I've just literally done, where I've showed you what I call my easy peasy colouring, and it's literally just 2 colours on each sort of section, as it were, rather than this kind of shading. So you can do it as complex or as simple as you like. Okay, so that's her trousers completed, and I think they look really effective. Very pleased with how they've turned out. So now we're going to be working on her hair, and I've picked out some nice browns. I'm going to try and go from just a sort of a gentle ombre look on just the ends being very slightly lighter really. So again, we're just going to start off here. Because it's such a small area, I'm going to go straight in with my dark colour and just flicking in little flicks of hair, because unlike the jeans and the skin, we're not going to be blending this, so we're just going to be putting little flicks of colour. But with such a small area of hair, that's much harder to achieve, so it's probably going to end up a little bit more blended than perhaps some other hairs that I have done on other occasions, but I think it's going to still look really effective. Now it's a little hard for you to see with the angle of the pen because I need to get right up close to the nib. It means that I'm afraid my fingers are a little bit in the way for you here, but I really need to try and work out a different camera angle, I think, for when we do colouring, but I'm still kind of working on that one. But anyway, that aside, I think you can see enough to, it's just you can't quite see the nib, but hopefully you can see enough to get the idea of what we're doing. And there we've just put the next colour on. And really all I'm doing is I'm using the artist drawn lines as my guide as to where the darker areas are to be. So now we've got our very pale colour, so we've just gone across the bits that were left just to add in the pale sections, and now we're going back up to our darkest colour, and again, as with all the other elements, we're just building up and down, layering our colours until we get it exactly how we want it to look. Just flicking. And as I say, with this hair, because it's such a small area, it's going to be a lot harder to get that kind of distinction in the flicks that you would normally get, so you may end up with it looking a little bit more blended than normal, but I think again it's still going to look really effective. Okay, so there we go, all finished, and now we're going to be working on the highlight parts of her jacket, because I'm doing like a pink elements and also green as the main, or sort of like a moss green as the main part of the jacket. So first with the pink, I'm just going to start out with the palest of the pinks, and that's just going to be on her collar, the lines of the jacket, the base of the jacket and the cuffs. And you've got to look here at, on these line parts, there's shape to them, where the shape is over her bust and over her hips. You need to look there as to where you're going to put the darker sections, so which bits will be darker and which bits won't be, and that's where you're going to shade. So obviously under her bust and where her waist is, where it dips in, that's going to be darker because there'll be shade and shadowing in that section. Obviously round her collar, under her neck there, that will be darker as well because her hair and her head etc will be creating shadowing. Also where the jacket crosses over, it will be in that center section, there'll be a darker section there, and obviously we're just doing around those little base of the jacket there, and just at the sides where it goes around the corners, it's sort of where her shape is, it's going to be darker, and then we're just blending that edge out so that it blends through nicely. And then I'm just adding in that section that I spoke about where the crossover of the jacket is, it would be darker in that section. Plus it's going over her bust, so that part is dipping down into her cleavage, so that also would be darker because of that as well. And don't worry so much, because those lines are quite thin, if you do go outside of them, you can just use your colourless blender and you will be able to push any colour back out the way. So don't panic if you go outside of those lines there, because it's not difficult to correct that. And in fact, I had to just tidy up a little bit around those edges and those lines where it just gone off the edges a little bit. And don't forget that as the alcohol in the marker evaporates, what's left behind is the pigment. So what happens is the alcohol's almost got a grey tinge to it. And you'll notice that if you put just the colourless blender down, which is what we're doing here, you'll see kind of like this, it changes the paper to like a slight grey sort of tinge to the paper. Well, that then dries off, and all that's left behind when you're using the coloured markers, not just the blender here, is the pigment. So when the colours do dry, or the markers dry on the paper, you are left behind with a slightly fresher, brighter look. So sometimes it is worth waiting, letting that evaporate. It only takes a few seconds really, and then looking before you carry on, because sometimes you've actually achieved what you're trying to achieve, but it just doesn't look right because of the marker having the alcohol in it, making it look slightly grayer than it is. I mean, you can see almost as we work that the pink of the collar and everything is looking brighter, literally, as I'm just tidying up here all around those edges. And you can see just on the side there by the cuff where the alcohol has just made the paper go slightly, as I say, with almost a grey tinge. And if it's doing that when the pen there has no pigment in it at all, then that's telling you what it would be, how it affects the coloured pens. So as I say, it's worth letting them dry. Now we're just adding some pink here to her shoes, and I did her earrings as well in the pink. And with the shoes, I'm just taking into account where the sun or the light source, as I've decided, is going to be. So the right hand shoe, as we look at her, is going to be darker than the left hand shoe as we look at her. So now I'm just taking two sort of sagey olive green pens, and by the way, all these markers will be listed on my corresponding blog post, and as will all the products will be linked in, but the specific markers will be listed, or I think there may even be just a photograph of the actual markers, so you'll know exactly what colours that I used for this drawing. But generally speaking, the products will be listed on the corresponding blog post, and all the information such as things like, you know, the sizing and things like that will be there as well, plus loads and loads more photographs than what I would put on the video. So now here we're just taking our darker olive green, and again just using the artist lines and our common sense really as to where would be shadowed, and putting in those darker areas. So for example, under her hair, where her hair would be all around sort of where the collar is, under the arm there where the creases are drawn in by our artist, under her bust, around her waist there, and obviously on the far side of her waist away from the light source, that will be even more of that waistline is darker, because obviously the light source is hitting even less of that. And now we're just blending through with our lighter tone. And actually when I put them down, they weren't as compatible as I thought they were from my test that I did, but I still liked them. They just took a little bit more effort to blend through. So I mean, all that you do with that is you just keep working with the marker over the area until it blends it out. But sometimes it just blends really easily, and other times you have to work a little bit harder. And this also took some of the green away from the initial colour that we laid down, and so even more so I needed to go back and layer up some additional layers. Now the reason I picked these colours was because it went really well with the papers that I had. So now we're just going back with the initial colour and just adding some extra accent. So not quite as much as we did the first time, but just sort of accenting that shadowing. Okay, so that's the jacket done. So now we're just gonna finish up on her sunglasses, and I decided that the blue of her jeans would be a great colour because it's kind of like that reflective sort of silvery grey colour that you see on sunglasses sometimes, kind of like those aviator style kind of glasses that I always had in my head, really. So I thought that would work really well, and of course we will be shining those up as well with some glossy accents. And so again I just used 3 tones there, and you can see how again we use the shadowing because like her hair should be shading one side and then her nose would be shading that other part there. So that was just doing that, and then we're just doing the nice pink colour on her lips. Normally I would do 2 colours on the lips, but again because it's such a small stamp, the lips were so delicate it really just didn't require that extra colour. And then I just decided that I wanted to add a little bit more strength of colour to the pink. And then I'm just taking my palest colour of that I used on the hair, and I'm just emphasising that ombre look there just on the ends. So just adding that a little bit more, and then I think that is her done. And I just think she looks fabulous. So oh, and yes, and then I suddenly remembered that we needed just to ground her. So I just took actually the palest colour that was used in her jacket, and I just put a little bit on the floor there, or made a floor for her to be standing on some ground. And then I just took my colourless blender and just went along those edges and softened that out so that it wasn't a harsh edge, and that ground colour that we used just blended out, and you'll see that better when that dries off, because right now all you can see is the grey of the colourless blender looking a bit odd. But otherwise that's our lady done, so we're going to put her to one side. Okay, so now we're getting to the making of the card itself, and I've got this gorgeous pink paisley butterfly collection papers. So I've picked some papers from there. They're double-sided, and you can see there the pinks, the blues, the greens, etc. that we used in our colouring. And I've also got 2 sheets of Simon Says stamp cardstock, a blue and a sort of khaki colour, because I wasn't sure which colour I wanted for my card base. So next you'll see there's some papers here that I have pre-cut up, including our little lady that I've cut to size and some layering for her. And this piece here I don't use in the end, and as you'll see I've pre-distressed these as well, so that these things are already done. I didn't think you needed to see me chop up bits of paper on screen. So this piece that I've got here, what I want to do is take this Simon Says stamp template. Again, I'll list all the details exactly what it is on my blog post, and also this Cosmic Shimmer texture paste, which is a gorgeous sparkle, and I'm going to create this lovely shimmery sort of pattern through the template using the paste. Now obviously it would have been much better if I'd have stuck this down, but to be honest it didn't need to worry. It went on beautifully, and you can see when I pull this off that the pattern is gorgeous, and I think it looks so pretty, and it's just an extra detail to that paper and to the whole card. So next I took my vintage gold and white Cosmic Shimmer embossing powder, and then used the perfect medium and just went round the edge of my girl that I'd also distressed, and then just using this powder, which has got some nice chunky bits in it, so I sprinkle some extra bits on the edge, on the corners, and as you can see once it's heated it looks absolutely stunning, very effective. Next I took my lovely little Kirsty Allsop Cuttlebug and this gorgeous fence from Tattered Lace die called Fence and Vines, and I just cut that out of one of the scraps of piece of paper, and I literally just put it through one turn, and as with all tattered lace, however detailed, it just popped out as easy as anything. Now all I'm doing here at the moment is just prepping all different parts. So what we've got is obviously the fence and other bits cut out, and now what I'm doing is taking this Pink by Design gorgeous kind of newspaper stamp, and I'm just randomly stamping tiny little pieces of it onto Our Lady, and I'm also using the Teresa Collins date stamp, and I'm just stamping 2015 up in the corner there. Just to really distress this and make it all look a bit more kind of, well, distressed. And then I'm taking my Copic white, or I think it's Copic opaque white paint, and just dotting bits on to the piece of paper, again just randomly around over where the ink is, so that it kind of just softens that stamped image. And then finally, as I said earlier, I just adding some glossy accents to her glasses, also her lips and her little heart chain there, which looks really effective, and you'll see in a minute it's so shiny, but of course at the moment it's still opaque, so until it dries completely you can't really see it to its best advantage. Again, still on the preparation, we're just taking some gorgeous string of pearl beads, and I'm just cutting off a length using my knife because I find that easier with the pearl beads. And you'll see there I've cut also a piece of cheesecloth, and then I'm just picking out some flowers that have got some wire tails, which I will then twist around a pencil to create some lovely little loops. So now we're getting to the point of actually constructing our card, and the first bit we're going to be doing is sort of matting and layering the different elements that we've created onto our card base. My card base, as you can see, I used the blue piece of card from Simon Says Stamp, and I made it into a card that is 5 inches by 7 inches in a landscape shape. I'm sticking down my layers using my Cosmic Shimmer glue. This piece has also been distressed, and I just think this cardstock is so pretty. It's almost a shame to cover it up, really. And then I'm using, I had a lovely blue doily. I don't, it was just such luck that I had one that was blue, but a white one I think would work just as nicely. But since blue was part of the theme that I was using, I thought I may as well make use of it. And then I just stick that in the middle so that the outside just is sort of loose and rough and ready, which is quite unusual for me, as you know. So next I am sticking down the first sort of mats and layers that are for my stamped image. However, I suddenly realized that I needed to first put down cheesecloth and my pearls, because my cheesecloth particularly needed to just sit under the edge of the mats that I'm putting down for my image. So I just put that to one side while I stuck that down, and I used my Cosmic Shimmer to stick that down with a thin layer of the Cosmic Shimmer, because I can then put the pearls over the top of that and it would hide that. But if you were worried or you weren't using pearls or something like that, you could just stick it further over so that it got hidden under the mat that you followed. And as you saw, I was trying to move my little doily there and I just managed to rip it rather than actually move it. So again, it doesn't really matter, we'll just stick that piece back in place and no big deal. So now we're going to put down my pearls, and it's really easy to stick down with your Cosmic Shimmer. Again, just over the same line, pop down a line of the Cosmic Shimmer and then the pearls will just stick down beautifully onto that. It's amazing, you can feel them grip straight away. Actually, it's quite surprising, and as you can see, they just look so pretty. And then I suddenly realized again I'd stuck something down out of order, so I just lifting this piece up because I needed to put down my lovely piece that we created with the sparkle texture paste on. I needed that to go on next, so I just lifted that edge piece up and then popped that piece on and just slid it underneath, and it went on fine, and it was all, you'll see why it needed to go on next, because I had it at an angle and it needed to have that edge just hidden underneath. And as you can see, it was ripping the doily a little, but again it didn't matter because that part of the doily wasn't going to show. And you can see just how lovely that texture paste is looking and how effective. It just gives it sort of well, literally texture and dimension, really, and also of course sparkle, which is always a good thing, I think, especially with a sexy lady like that we're putting on as our stamped image. I think really she was just so gorgeous that she deserved pearls and diamonds all over the place. So I definitely think this worked, and I think it just makes it a very feminine look. I love all that sort of the kind of distressed and all of that is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I think it looks so effective, and I think that particular image could be used for something really modern or something more sort of in a way more traditional, more feminine. I think that it's amazing that such an image can be used in so many different ways, which is really cool. So now we've got my final layer before the actual image goes on. And you'll see the piece at the top there, it was actually a bird cage that was on one of the pieces of paper, and I cut it out with the intention of adding it to the card as an element, but in the end I decided it just didn't need it. It would have hidden a lot of the texture paste, and I just felt that that was a shame because it just looked so pretty, and to hide any, you know, it was already had elements of it hidden, it really didn't want any more. And this was one of those just metal little sort of circular paper clips things that you can get, and I just thought that would look so nice. And as I put it on, it suddenly occurred to me this would be a perfect place to add my sentiment. And I had a scrap of the pink paper, so I cut that to a tag shape and then just checked that it would look okay under there. And actually, as I pushed it under, it kind of crumpled it, and then I thought, that's even better, I could distress it and make it crumply. So I then took my distress tool and just went around the edges of it and made it all kind of distressy. I just love how sometimes these things are just occur and you come up with an idea and it just occurs. I mean, most of this card actually was sketched out and I had the idea kind of worked out, but some of these elements just changed because of some, you know, little bits like this, and I thought it worked out well. And then I took my stamp set again, my original stamp set, and I took out the sentiment from the set and stamped it again immediately. I just used my Memento ink again and I just took it straight from the set onto the stamp, and here I just used a normal stamp block even, so it's not even a rocker block, so you can see even with the normal stamp block it goes on beautifully. I then took my crocodile and added a hole to create a real look of the label, and then I tucked it underneath. And I did think afterwards, I thought I better glue it just in case, so I just added a little bit of the Cosmic Shimmer, which kind of flattened it out a bit, so I just give it a bit more of a rumple up there because I really liked that kind of wrinkly rumply look to it, so I kept it like that. And then I moved on to adding my stamped image onto my matting and layering, and she'd sort of curled, so I just gave her a bit of a curl the other way. And then I used my pin flare glue gel here. She's the only bit that I actually 3D'd. Well, no, that's not true. I actually do 3D the little fence, but the rest of it was just built up really. But this I thought would look nice, just having a little extra dimension. And the fence here, I would normally not be so rough and ready with my pin flare. However, I knew that I wanted to add some elements to it. I wasn't quite sure what at that point in time. Probably some flowers or something, so I knew that it didn't matter if the pin flare showed through. And actually it was quite a detailed stamp, and with the glitter behind I figured that in any event, even if I didn't put anything over the front of the fence, the pin flare, even if it sort of appeared to show through, would actually just look like the glittery part from behind, because it's going to dry completely clear. And you can see when I put it down, you actually couldn't see that there was any pin flare showing through, and yet I really just shoved it on any old how. So it worked really well, and it ended up fine. And then it was just when I sort of saw little bits though, it made me think, well, yeah, I could add flowers rather than, because I was thinking maybe glitter or some buttons or I didn't know what, but I suddenly thought flowers would look really cute, you know, sort of poking through the fence as it were. So I popped those little baby flowers on, which matched perfectly the colour of my jeans, so it brought that colour in. Then I had this gorgeous little button, and I don't know where it was from. It was just some set that I had, and it was loose in my button box, and it may have even been one that I pinched off some of my mum's clothing, because when she gets new clothes and they've got the spare buttons on the inside, I pinch them and take them off, so it might have even been that. Then I added a big blob of glue gel to the middle of the card, and you can see these are the flowers that you saw me picking out, and I just wrapped the tails around a pencil, and then I kind of just twisted them together to make a little bouquet. I wasn't too worried about the bottom part of it because I knew that wasn't going to show, but I just thought the little bits twisted up like that would look so effective. And the colours, bringing the white of the paper, I thought was important, because you want to even up that colour tone, because otherwise the white where you've printed the image can look a bit stark unless you bring, I think, a little bit of that across. Now originally I was going to put the stick pins over where the flowers were, but I suddenly thought they would look really nice over where I and putting them, but I realised as I was trying to put them in that there wasn't enough glue gel in there to actually hold them in place, so I just lifted the corner of, or the side of my image up there so that I could just add a bit more glue gel, and now you can see how they're sinking into the glue gel as I'm sliding them underneath that image there, so you can see. And that means when the glue gel finally sets, these stick pins are going to be stuck fast into it and they're not going to be going anywhere. So pop those in there, and beautiful pearl ones. I think these are Prima, but I'm not 100% sure. And I just again was lucky that they had them in those colours. And I put a huge blob of glue gel down to stick one of those beautiful gauze butterflies down in the corner there, and it's just looking really floral and natural with the flowers and the butterflies and things. And then I've added another flower down the bottom onto the fence because I just thought that looked better, and then a big white flower, again bringing that white across just to even things up. And then this little flower had little blue dots on it, so that kind of brought the cream and the white and the blue all in one place. And then of course the peach flower, again just to even everything up. And then finally I had this gorgeous little cameo which was in the peach, and I just thought it would finish off that edge piece really nicely, just that sort of edge corner. And then for some reason I'm now working on my scoreboard and cutting tool, but anyway, I then started using my glossy accents to add some of the Martha Stewart little glitter or fluttery hearts, sort of iridescent hearts, to the actual image, just to give a little bit more shimmer, and again just to balance that shimmer with the shimmer of the paper next to it, and you can see how pretty that looks. So next I just want to add a little colour to the sentiment. There's a hollow word there, so I just used the pink peach colour that we used on our Sexy Mama hair on her coat, and just added it to the word there, and I think that just really finishes that off and balances that all out and makes it look really pretty. Now finally I just added some nice layering, matting and layering to the inside, and also I die cut a banner from the La La Land die that I had, and just added that to the inside just to make the inside look a little pretty too. And that's it, that's our finished card. I've taken us outside so that we could really appreciate how gorgeous the card is, at least I think it is, I hope you do too. So for now, if you want information about the products used, details about the card and loads more photos, then do click on the link below this video to take you to the corresponding blog post. Otherwise, all that's left for me to say is thank you to Kenny K for sending me the stamps and letting me share them with you guys, and to say bye for now, and I will see you again next time. Bye!
Where do you wanna be? I'm talking about you and me. What do you want? What do you see? And where is forever residing? The girl's gotta make her peace with a man to understand things. Clear out the way, the drive of the day, darling. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? Well, it's about as new as last year's rain pouring down from the sky so high, and you get used to knowing everything about each other, so you don't ask why. Oh, but you better not forget or reclaim the world as ours, and laughter too, the days to come. Where do you wanna be? I'm talking about you and me. What do you want? What do you see? And where is forever residing? The girl's gotta make her peace with a man to understand things. Clear out the way, the drive of the day, darling. Where do you want to be? planned everything, from the cups in the kitchen to every little niche, to us running to each other like an old-time movie. I don't mean to push, but I was just wondering,